I'm always grateful to practice with this community, but especially on a day like today, Yom HaZikaron, which is a day in which we're invited to remembering those who have died in defense of the state of Israel, in Israel's War of Independence, and other wars and acts of terror. And of course, how could we forget those who perished on October 7th, those who have perished in the war that has ensued since that time. So on Yom HaZikaron, we engage in this act, this solemn and sacred act of remembering. And I think we have this extraordinary opportunity with this community to really remember as a practice. And as painful and sorrow-filled as this day is, I think it's also really meaningful that in our counting of the Omer, today is the 20th day, which is the day of Yesod Shebetiferet. So I was thinking about really grounding our practice of remembrance in this quality of Tiferet, of compassion. Compassion for ourselves as we carry this fresh pain, compassion for loved ones who have died or who have other dear ones who have died in their family, and compassion for our human family as this war continues to take the lives of so many innocent people created in the divine image. And as our tradition teaches, every soul is a world. So our world is diminished by the absence of so many. And still, how precious that we can use our practice to participate in this collective act of memory and compassion. So I want to invite everyone to begin by sitting. You can keep your eyes open or closed or anywhere in between. And let's just simply embody this shape of sitting. Notice the energetic pull, allowing you to root, and another energetic pull, allowing you to rise. Both channels of energy are moving, allowing us to be fully here. When you feel yourself fully rooting and rising, and a bit more steadiness begins to wash over you, I invite you to lean into that steadiness. Presence yourself in this shape. Notice what's supporting you, the earth holding you up, your chair or cushion, the floor and ground beneath you. Notice what's holding you here. Notice your yesod, your foundation. And also notice what is drawing you up and out. What is your heart reaching for? The seat of Tiferet. Maybe it's a prayer, a longing, a feeling. As your breath settles into a natural rhythm, simply thank your breath for showing up, for being a source of chiyut, of life force that runs through you, through all of us, and in between us. This is not a practice of perfection, it's a practice of shlemut, of wholeness. So along those lines, we welcome in all our parts. The parts of us that are devastated and despairing. The the parts that are somber but grateful, the parts that are distracted and disoriented. We're called to be here in our fullest capacity, pieced together with all of our parts. And today we're here to remember not only those souls who perished in defense of the state of Israel, but also to remember, to reintegrate those parts of ourselves which we have forgotten or cast off or buried. Let's take 3 rounds of breath as we seal our intention for practice today. Feel free to keep your eyes closed if you've closed them or to open them. I'm going to offer a bit of instruction and sort of framing, and then we'll sit once again. So again, today is Yom HaZikaron, Israel's Memorial Day, and of course, very different from the mood and the way that we often commemorate the American Memorial Day. For 24 hours in Israel, all places of public entertainment are closed. Anyone who's been in Israel for Yom HaZikaron will remember the many somber and just solemn rituals that take place throughout the country, and of course, a collective moment of silence. And I think there's a lot we can learn from this observance. Instead of barbecues and sales, as many of us sort of engage in on Memorial Day, we really intentionally make space for and embrace this collective sadness. And we don't turn away from the loss and the complexity. We sit in it or stand with it. We come close to it. And as we're still so very close to October 7th, this feels particularly powerful and painful. And I think remembering is such a foundational Jewish act. So of course, we're commanded not only to keep Shabbat, the Sabbath, but also to remember Shabbat. We're commanded to remember Yetziat Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt. We're commanded to remember what Amalek did to us in the desert. There is a pasuk, a line from Deuteronomy that says, remember the days of old. Reflect upon the years of generations. Ask your parents, they will tell you, your elders, and they will inform you. It doesn't come as a surprise, of course. It's so just deeply woven into our tradition to remember the past, our history, to learn about those who came before us, to learn about their lives and their sacrifices, their struggles, and how they impacted the world. And Rabbi Jonathan Sacks writes in the introduction to the Koren Yizkor book, Judaism gave 2 majestic ideas their greatest religious expression: memory and hope. Memory is our living connection to those who came before us. Hope is what we hand on to the generations yet to come. Those we remember live on in us, in words, gestures, a smile here, and an act of kindness there, that we would not have done had that person not left their mark on our lives. That is what Yizkor is. Memory as a religious act of thanksgiving for a life that was, and that still sends its echoes and reverberations into the life that is. For when Jews remember, they do so for the future, the place where, if we're faithful to it, the past never dies. In meditation, we think about each moment, each breath as an act of zechira, remembering. One of the ways that our mindfulness practice meets memory is that we can only actually remember something from the past in the present moment. And when we choose to remember in a particular way, I'm going to suggest here gently and with warmth, with a quality of compassion, tiferet, I think we have an opportunity to really turn that act of zechira into a practice. And I want to suggest that, especially on a day that is so heavy like today, for many of us, we don't have to go off seeking the deepest pain. We don't have to overwhelm ourselves with sadness. We can just touch it. We can stay with it in compassion and breathe. And so I invite us today to dedicate our practice to the act of remembering, and particularly with compassion. So for some of us, we're remembering those who were lost in defense of the state of Israel. For others, we're remembering moments that we experienced a connection to Israel that feel important. We may choose to remember something else entirely that we've allowed to fall away from our consciousness, but which we now, in this moment, feel called to remember. And for still others, we can just remember that we're alive, and to use each breath as a remembering practice of our very aliveness. So as we prepare to sit, I invite you to think about what you want to remember. And see if you can return to that remembrance over and over through our practice together, all within this field of tiferet, of compassion. Can we weave that zechira into our bodies, our breath, our consciousness? And as we bring this remembrance into the body and therefore into the moment, I think it has the power of helping orient how we want to move forward beyond our time together today. All right. Let's practice. I invite you to take your seat once again. And as you allow your eyes to close or your gaze to soften, you may want to place your hands somewhere on the body to kind of gain another layer of information about how you're feeling. Maybe the heart, the belly, the lap, maybe hands cradled one in the other. We commit to welcoming ourselves exactly as we are. Sometimes when we're feeling sadness or other difficult sensations, we can also feel a kind of clenching in the body. So notice if you can soften even ever so slightly with the intention of creating a bit of space so that whatever emotions arise, they can flow freely. And when you feel ready to create some stillness, when you feel your body starting to receive the support of the earth, I invite you to take a couple of deep cleansing breaths. Allowing your attention to fall on whatever you feel called to remember today. Remember to remember so gently, gingerly, with warmth. We'll continue in silence for the next couple of minutes, and I'll bring us together with the sound of my voice. Begin to deepen your breath. As your breath expands and takes root in your body, this new version of yourself takes root as well. This version of yourself that is born of your practice, of your remembering. And you may want to place a hand on your heart or bring the palms of your hands together at the heart center, or even cradle your hands together at the belly. El Malay Rachamim, God full of compassion, provide a true rest on the wings of Shekhinah for all those we remember on this day. May the merciful one shade them forever with the divine wings and bind their souls up in the bonds of life. May they rest in peace. Into our hands, we place gratitude for this practice, this collective gathered here now, and those who will practice with us later. We give thanks for the ability to remember, to be with our sadness, to be with our memories, to be with what we have forgotten. May our remembrances carry us into the day ahead and the days ahead with a fuller sense of who we are, whom we come from, and who we wish to become. May our remembrances bring us into deeper, more loving relationship with ourselves and with one another. I invite you to take a couple of soft, gentle breaths as we conclude our practice. And I turn it back to Josh for Kaddish Yatom.
So much, Jenny. Really beautiful. We will have a chance to reflect more and ask questions with Jenny in just a moment. And before that, we have an opportunity to say Morris Kaddish. If you are reciting Kaddish today for anyone in particular, you can put their name in the chat. We'll open up the chat again. And we'll put the text of the Kaddish on the screen. And if you're so inclined and you're not usually a Kaddish sayer, it may, in light of today's practice, you should certainly feel welcome if you'd like to join us in saying Kaddish as well. So you can unmute yourself if you'd like to join in, and we'll say the Mornis Kaddish together. Yitkadal, v'yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah, Rabbi Alma, Livrach, Chirutei, v'yamlich yachutei, v'chayechon, v'yomechon, v'chayei v'chol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala, u'bizman kariv, v'yifu, v'yehei Shmei Rabbah Mevorach, Yitbarach, v'yishtabach, v'yitpa'ar, v'yitcholam, v'yitnaseh, Yithadar, v'yitaveh, v'yithalal, Shmei Kedusha, La'ela, Mikol, Brachacha, V'shirata, Shbechata, V'nechamata, Amarana Alma, Shlama Rabba Min Shemayim L'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Yaseh Shalom B'mamai Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Kol Yoshvei Tevel.
Amen. Kol Yisrael. Kol Yoshvei Tevel. Amen.
There we go. Okay, so we'll bring Jenny back up here, and there we go. All right. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Jenny, for leading us today. Yeah, it's such a powerful practice and a powerful day this year. It's a Yom HaZikaron that I think is, for so many people, is a different kind of day this year than it's been in the past. And I wonder for you, personally, how your what you're focusing on, or how this is manifesting for you personally this year, in both Yom HaZikaron and the practice that you're bringing to us.
Yeah. I mean, I've always, having had the gift of living in Israel for a couple of years, which is part of how we met once upon a time. It's such a different thing to observe this day in the diaspora, and hard to know often how exactly to kind of make space for it. These are the kinds of days where it feels especially kind of like, I feel like my existence, where I situate myself feels so different than kind of what's going on around me in the non-Jewish world, or just kind of out in this American world. So it's hard. I felt really particularly grateful that I had Minyan this morning, and I have this gathering here in the middle of the day, so that I can ground myself among my people and make some space for this memory, and not just move past it too quickly. There's sort of a candle burning in my space, and lit a candle with my family last night. I'm very aware that this moment means something very different for each of the members of my family. I have a child who's on a gap year there now, and called me from one of the Tech-S, the events that he was at, and let me know he's not getting on the plane to leave, which is to say, he's experiencing this in a very particular way. So just kind of holding all of that. Thanks for asking.
Yeah, and I'd love to invite. I mean, one typical thing on Yom HaZikaron in Israel is just to share memories or stories of people who have died, and either people who died, as you said, either in the establishment or defense of the country, and also in acts of terror. And for me, I think of Matt Eisenfeld and Sarah Duker, who were they were a little older than me, actually, and Matt had graduated Yale by the time I got there as an undergraduate, but was killed. They were killed, an engaged couple who were killed in a suicide bombing in 1996. And every year I feel like I watch the Facebook page of the people, those of us who knew them, and it's been almost 30 years now, which is amazing. And just to imagine what they would have contributed to the world, and did what they did contribute in their time, but also all of you and I were talking before we got on about where our various children are at this point, and and just imagining what that life would have been, and really mourning the loss of something that was in front of them. And so and you mentioned Jonathan Sacks, and I think this invitation of Yizkor, of this act of remembrance, that is like such a gift. It's like one of the things that Jews do best is obviously is grief, and but how we honor and allow the past and memory to live, and also not to be hopefully trapped in it, right, at the same time. And I think our practice also just serves that so much. I wonder if you want to comment any more about that.
Yeah. I mean, I have felt that so powerfully, just even in my little community and world. It just happened to be that over the last 2 weeks, we have buried 3 elders, 3 people in our community who were incredibly involved and engaged and present, 90 and above. And as I've been guiding their families, touched once again that this idea that the Yizkor part reminds us that grief is the work of a lifetime. And just as you said, it's so important that we have these moments to touch and to just dip in to those feelings, and to just come flush with our memories and our longing. But at the same time, like, we have to keep marching forward and not feel overwhelmed by our grief or have our grief prevent us from really living. And so I'm just like you, I'm just so appreciative that there are these places where that can contain our grief, but still leave us free, hopefully freer to keep going and to nurture hope, and to take those memories with us as we, keep dreaming.
I also I think it's important just to also give permission and encouragement, but like I think for so much, I shouldn't say. For me, this has been my experience, and I get the impression it's been the experience for many others, is that since October 7th, that the grief is like so pervasive, and it's really like just under the surface. And I've had a couple of occasions at Yisker, at Pesach just now. And then again, I was on a retreat this past weekend where, if you just sort of scratch the surface and you make the room to allow those feelings to come out, it's like, for me anyway, they're really right there. And in some way, I almost feel like, I know we haven't really had a chance. I mean, the country's, Israel's been at war, for the last 7 months. There's been obviously unspeakable suffering, and so it's just, the opportunity just to properly process grief, to metabolize it. As a people, we've really been struggling, and so I found, our practice to be very important, but also having community where that can, and ritual where that can happen. Ritual is so important for that kind of work.
Yeah, I really do think about ritual as this gift of having containers sort of scattered around to help allow me to pour the feeling in, or in other ways kind of hold what's there and come into awareness of it with enough safety that the structure provides. And I agree with you. It's so pervasive. It's just under the surface, and there's so many different layers. I was even thinking about it, thinking about my kids and their next year, for the parents or even the grandparents in our community. When the forms start coming, and I'm starting to be in another forms season. So I'm thinking about my kids' adventures that are upcoming this summer and in the fall. And was remembering back to like when I was in day camp or even when I started college, and I just didn't have any of this sort of consciousness around my Jewishness, felt so irrelevant to those moments in my lives. And my life. And I'm sure there are folks here in our group that are significantly older than I am and do remember moments maybe that felt more like this. But for me, it feels very different. And I grieve that sort of freedom and innocence that my children don't have as they look ahead into the year.
Yeah, I think, other people have said it, but I think that our generation, you and I are roughly the same age. We grew up in an anomalously good time to grow up Jewish, in the world, and unfortunately, it feels like it's reverting back to the norm. There was a question that did come in here. I just saw. First of all, I think Deborah asked what was the Siddur that you mentioned. I think you said Jonathan Sachs writing an introduction to Yisker.
Yes,
is that right?
Yeah, it's a Koren Yisker book. The Koren, Koren, is the publisher.
Koren publisher. So just look up their Yisker book. And then there was an unidentified Zoom user asking about Rina, Song of Joy and Wind. I'm not sure if you're referring to like the line in Psalm 126, Hazorim bedima berina yiksaru, right? Those who plant in tears will harvest in joy, which has been a big refrain in a lot of places, I think, in the last 7-8 months.
Yeah, I was also
So
thinking of a line from Psalms, Be'erev yalin bechi u'leboker rina, that we go to bed with tears and we wake up with rina, with joy, which feels, I mean, I don't know how that's going to feel in Israel this year, but that's usually the flow. As Yom HaZikaron folds into Yom HaAtzmaut. I don't know how it will feel this year.
I think Joe Biden is fond of quoting that one, as I recall.
Oh, really?
Well, in the morning, joy comes in the morning. I think he's
Yes. Yes. Okay.
So you can hear the dog. There's a siren going by. But anyway, Rena there, Rena meaning joy, right? But often is accompanied by expressions around tears and certainly I think that's one of those things about the transition from Yom HaZikaron to Yom HaAtzmaut, which is happening right about now in Israel, right? Is that these tears of mourning become tears of joy, and there's a liminal quality where you don't know, why you don't know which tears you're shedding necessarily, which is kind of which is very powerful. Yeah. I just want to honor Harris's comment here. Holding and containing this grief is so complicated by the politics of the moment. For some, it is not appropriate to grieve for all of those who are suffering and all the reasons for that suffering, right? And holding up that there are so many innocents in Gaza and in Israel who have suffered and died and experienced. Everybody has had so much loss. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Harris. And this, you may have heard this in my teaching, and it's really something inspired by Rabbi Jordan Ben Pell and his teaching as I was going through the meditation teacher training program through IJS, that I find it really helpful to not go looking for the hardest, deepest pain inside of me. And to just kind of move through those feelings gently. And part of the mindfulness practice is not just tearing myself apart with sadness, but allowing myself to kind of be with it in a way that is actually manageable and tolerable, but is also real and true. And I know that if I really let myself think about the breadth and the depth of the suffering just all around, it's beyond actually what I can conceptualize. It's too much. So part of the containing or the container of this practice is being able to do so in a way that I can metabolize in my body, but also doesn't feel superficial.
I think that's such an important point. I found myself talking about too a lot is in so many conversations it immediately goes to, how am I supposed to feel about Hamas? How am I supposed to feel about Nazis? How am I supposed to feel about whatever? It's 98, 99% of our life is not lived in that zone. Right. And so frequently we want to go right there to the most extreme example. But just remembering that, most of our life, thank God, is not, lived there. And so focusing that. There was one technical question, and I think with this we'll probably close. Tissue asked a question. Today is the 5th of ER, yes, which is Yom HaAtzmaut technically. However, good question. When Yom HaZikaron, when the 4th of ER starts on a Saturday night, you don't want to start Yom HaZikaron, right after Shabbat is the idea. So they push it off by one day. And so Yom HaZikaron I should say, you don't want to do Yom HaZikaron. It would have been on Shabbos, and that would have made Yom HaAtzmaut Sunday. You push it off one day, and so they pushed Yom HaZikaron gets pushed off by an additional day, so that Yom HaAtzmaut starts Monday night into Tuesday. Right. So sorry if I was confusing on that. Bottom line is it's Shabbos. That's the reason. So, okay, great to see these. Wonderful. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Okay. Well, we will be back tomorrow, same time, same channel. Jenny, thank you as always so much for being here and sharing your teaching and your Torah with us. And thanks everyone for being here, and hope to see you again soon. Okay.
Peace.